Hey guys, this is Ada. I'm coming in to do a video this morning, and what I'm going to talk about today is acceptance. Last week, the Lord gave me a word about acceptance, and guys, it was so freeing to me. I feel like if I didn't come in and talk about, what the Lord gave me, I would really be doing Him a horrible disservice. So, without further ado, I want to talk about the word the Lord gave me. So many times as Christians, we go through hardship and persecution, which is a part of the Christian walk. But, the goal is not to get bitter, right? But, sometimes it depends on what it is. We could be left in that situation a while till we learn a lesson, right? Well, this is my situation, or was my situation. God would give me, I came to Christ around 30. Actually, I was saved as a little girl. I accepted Christ in my heart, but of course, my mind wasn't renewed and I didn't really walk with the Lord. But at 30, He called me out and I was radically changed. I went from doing just being on fire from the Lord. Some people say it was a gradual process, but no, for me, it was like radical. And so, with that being said, I started off teaching young people at my apartment and my own kids. I started doing Bible studies and teaching them. And we had great Bible studies. I had many great successes. God just really blessed me with so much revelation. I began interceding for my family. I began just doing a lot for the Lord at that time. I was just on fire for the Lord. But then through the years, there was this constant thorn in my flesh. And I'm like, Lord, well, when you going to fix this? What about this? And, it just every time I think it would get better, it would just not be better. It was just a constant thorn. But all the time, God was blessing over here. He was blessing me to go back to school to get my degree. He was blessing me at work and promoting me at work. He was blessing, um, the relationship with my dad, being able to stay at home with him, and just all kinds of blessings over here, right? And but this constant thorn in my side. And I'm like, okay, Lord, when you gonna fix this? But guys, after many, many, many years, I began to learn to humble myself. And when I humbled myself and began to really pray with a pure heart about that situation and really seek understanding, then it started getting better, guys. Did He totally remove it? No, He did. But did it get better? Yes. And it's because I learned to humble myself. I learned through suffering. Just like Christ learned obedience through suffering. A lot of times we learn obedience through suffering. But, just going through many trials and tribulations and realizing that a lot of times we don't enter God's rest because we fail to trust Him. We may trust Him over here, but then over here we want to continue to do our own thing. We don't want to give it to God. We want to just continue to do things in the strength of our own flesh, which brings me to the scripture that I'm going to reference, guys. Okay, it's Hebrews 3 and 11. So I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. And who were they? They were the Israelites. God had performed miracles as they went through the wilderness, as He was bringing them out of Egypt and bringing them into the promised land. He performed miracle after miracle, but they would always revert back to the idolatry or not trusting God. They just did not trust God. So God said that some of them would not enter His rest. They would never uh, enter the promised land. And for us, under the new covenant, of course, is we cease from our own works and we begin to trust God. We stop trying to manipulate situations for our good, and we learn to trust God despite what we see. And I learned that emotions human emotion is very, very strong, very powerful. And what I've learned is that when we learn to balance those emotions and submit those emotions to Christ, then we can look at things in a balanced way. Because the word tells us to take every thought captive and lead it to the obedience of Christ. So where does these imaginations come from? The Bible calls them vain imaginations, right? Because the carnal mind is hostile toward God and it doesn't understand God's way. So our natural mind is at war against the things of God. So what happens when we have a thorn in our flesh? Like Paul said that he was sent a thorn in his flesh to buffet him because of the greatness of the revelation that God was given to him. Well, that's the same way that I felt. But I was so clueless because I was so focused on the problem that I couldn't see God. And he was so blessed in so many other areas. But this little bitty problem was huge to me. And so I kind of let it consume the blessings at one point. And I began to kind of despise the blessings of God because I was focused on this problem, this thorn in my flesh. What was the answer? Well, when we begin to accept where we are in life, then we can begin to expect God to move. Because as long as we're not resting and we're trying to do things in our own strength and with our own carnal mind and carnal thinking, then that's when we get stuck. We get stuck. Sometimes God will allow these trials to go for a while for us to learn to persevere and for us to learn patience and endurance and to become strong in the Lord, in the power of his might. But when we take on this spirit of pride and feel like, okay, I can fix it, and we just let it irritate us and we get all in our emotions about it, then we're letting the enemy come in and steal our joy and steal our peace. And then we find ourselves hostile. No matter what God is doing over here, we can no longer see it because we're so focused over here. So what I've learned, guys, is when we learn to accept where we're at and learn to enter into God's rest, we can find God doing all kinds of miracles. What is our part? Our part is to go about our business. Go about our daily business, our daily works, communing with God, doing what we're supposed to do as humans. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. We're to go about our business and trust God. We see the problem. We acknowledge the problem, acceptance. But at the same time, we are trusting Him to take care of it in His time. And so what are we doing in the meanwhile? We're trusting, we're speaking God's word. When the enemy come in and try to get us off course by showing us all this negative stuff, we speak the word. We trust God. And if we don't know the word, we say, well, I choose to believe that God's going to fix this in his time. So guys, with all that being said, sometimes we can allow the enemy to magnify a problem, and it will consume us and it will take over us and it will plant a root of bitterness in us. And we don't want a bitter root, because when you get a bitter root, everything becomes contaminated. Everything that we perceive, we're perceiving through that bitter root of unbelief. And now we can't believe God. And now we're stuck. And now we're into works of the flesh, which is witchcraft. The works of the flesh is everything that God is not: envy, jealousy, lust. And we enter into works of the flesh because we refuse to believe God and take on the fruit of the Spirit, which is joy, peace, long suffering. So guys, I have a word for you today. Many of you are stuck because you're magnifying the problem. And God is blessing in these other areas, but you're stuck. Maybe it's a marriage, maybe it's an illness, maybe it's your child. It could be any trial that you're going through. But as long as you focus on the problem, you're going to stay there, because God told Israelites, because of their unbelief, they would not enter his rest. So we have to learn to rest in him despite what we're going through. Are you going to have people mocking you? Yeah. Well, she should do this or that. I'm leaving. Or they may say, child, you just need to do this and that and the other. Well, of course, people going to have their opinion, right? Everybody has an opinion. When they're not going through it. Everybody has an opinion. You should do this, that, and the other. But the only thing the Lord asks us to do when we come upon these things, he's not all like this secular humanism where everything is done in your own strength and what you can do and how you can read this book, that book, or another and solve all these problems. What God is about. And I'm not saying that you can't get information from a book, guys. Sometimes God will lead you to a book, but make sure it's his leading and not you doing stuff in your own strength. So, with that being said, learning to trust him. If you truly believe, learning to trust him and not leading to your own understanding, that is the key. Because you have accepted the circumstance, but you're believing God for something different. He may leave you in that circumstance for years. But I do believe our mind will determine how fast we pass that test. If we're humble and we receive from God, okay, this is where I'm at, Lord. There's a purpose, but all things work together for my good. I believe the revelation will come sooner. But if we constantly kicking against it and even using Christian terminology to try to get out of something. I rebuke you, devil. I bind you, Satan, and all that. And there is a place for all of that. There's a place. But when it's just strictly our flesh bucking because we don't want to be uncomfortable, then that is the problem. So, with that being said, guys, accept it, believe and trust God that he's delivering you, and that time is in his hand, because his time is not our time. His way is not our way. And just learn to accept where you're at, believe God, and in due season, you will reap a reward if you don't think. So guys, with that being said, thank you for watching this video. I pray it's been helpful. And if you feel like this will help someone else, please share. And if you feel like you want to hear more of my videos, some will be on the word, bringing the word to you. Some will be a prophetic word. And then I talk about help as it relates to some of the supplements I take that may be beneficial to you. So thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful and blessed day.